Hi everyone, for those who don't know me, my name is Maryssa. I'm a postpartum doula with the Lemon Grove, and I'm a mom to my son Benjamin. He's 4 years old. I wanted to be a mom my whole life, except maybe once when I was 5 years old, and I found out what an epidural was, and I swore to my mother up and down that I was never going to have a baby, and I was only ever going to adopt because nobody was putting a needle in my back. Obviously that didn't stick. I was 25 when I found out I was pregnant. My period was late, and I was working a double shift as a waitress. It was Mother's Day weekend. I remember one dad said to me, "Oh, you must have children of your own. You're so good at this." Cue the panic. My brain had already been racing all day. I thought I had a baby in my belly, so that was the last thing I wanted to hear. I was in no position to be pregnant at that time. My son's father was 2 months out of rehab after a traumatic relapse, where I wasn't even sure if sticking around was the right thing for me anymore. I gathered up the courage and I sent him a text while I was still working. "My period's late. I'm kind of freaking out. Do you think you could come over after work? I have to take a test." When I sat down to take the test, part of me already knew what the result was going to be. And as I was sitting there peeing on the stick, it already said that I was pregnant. So I knew that my life was about to change forever. I knew this was a bad idea. I knew that I shouldn't. But the only thing that kept sticking out to me was that this was my baby and I was going to have this baby. On paper, I had the perfect pregnancy. No morning sickness, no insomnia, no food aversions, average weight gain, really no symptoms at all. On the inside, my head was spinning. I was really angry, and I felt stuck. I felt like I was being forced to grieve everything about my life. I was in a loveless and a toxic relationship. I didn't know anyone with a baby. None of my friends were even in relationships at the time. It was really isolating. The whole time, all I heard was, "You're meant for this. You're going to be such a good mom. I'm so excited for you." How was everybody seeing what I couldn't see? My baby already deserved better in my mind. I was bringing a baby into a really bad situation, and that definitely wasn't my definition of a good mom. My labor started on a Sunday morning, and I felt zero pain for a long time. I did have to go in super early because my son passed meconium in the womb, and I had no idea what that even was or how to explain it. Anticipating pain is really difficult for me. It's something I really struggle with, and I have a lot of medical anxiety. So it's safe to say I had no birth plan because in my mind, my baby was going to come however they wanted anyways, right? I was given Pitocin to move things along, and I still felt no pain for hours. It was really hard waiting that long because it was giving my brain too much time to spiral and imagining the pain that I was going to be in eventually. I was then told that they were going to perform a membrane sweep. I was told that it was not going to hurt. It ended up being extremely painful. I almost jumped off the table. It was so shocking. For the rest of my labor, I felt really violated and poked and prodded at any time an intervention happened after that. My nervous system was crumbling, but I told no one, not wanting to bother anyone else. They were busy, and I was fine. I knew that an epidural would only slow things down, so I held off for as long as I possibly could. I made it to around 7 or 8 centimeters dilated, and I was tolerating my contractions fine, but I was so exhausted. I finally asked for the epidural, hoping that I could get some sleep before it was time to push. Now remember when I told you the epidural was the reason that I never wanted to have children in the first place. I was waving every warning flag, throwing my arms up, giving all the warnings that this was by far the most terrifying thing for me. I was more terrified of this needle than I was of pushing a human being out of my body. The anesthesiologist, unfortunately, ended up being the rudest person I came into contact with. She snapped at me and immediately shut me down. She also yelled at another nurse while the needle was in my spine. It was awful. I was really scared and I felt really small. At least she did a great job placing the needle, or at least that's what I told myself while she was leaving and I was choking back the tears. I pushed for 2.5 hours the following evening before my son made his grand entry. The epidural wore off, and I ended up feeling mostly everything. I was beyond capacity for anything that was happening to me at that moment. My nervous system was going haywire, and I just wanted everyone to leave me alone and stop touching me. I had consented to a training midwife, and the entire time I was regretting it, I did not speak up. I didn't want to make her feel bad. There came a point in my labor where there was no progress being made, and mentally I shut down. I saw my team looking at each other, and I knew what they were thinking. I freaked out. No way was I heading into a C-section after 40 hours of my feelings and worries being ignored. I spent all day being poked at, and I felt totally out of control. I was not about to head into another traumatic experience by being cut open. I pushed. They told me to push one more time, and I couldn't. Somebody saved my mental sanity for a moment because they literally pulled my son out of my body. I wasn't crying. There was no rush of emotion or happiness for my new baby. I wanted to hide in the dark. I wanted everybody out. I didn't want anyone's hands on me, and I did not want to touch my baby. It felt wrong having him on my chest. No one knew what was happening to me on the inside, but I felt like it was written all over me. Why can nobody see that I'm not okay? Does anyone see me? Why is everyone still touching me? Doesn't anyone know what I just went through? Get this baby off of me. But I took my baby, and I laid there, wide-eyed, looking at his father, who understandably felt helpless. I got stitched up without being numbed, and I screamed that I could feel it multiple times before anybody stopped. They jabbed me with numbing needles. I was going to kick someone in the face at this point. But on the outside, I laid still. My breathing was all over the mat, and everyone was whispering. My placenta wasn't delivering. So I obviously assumed that I was doing something wrong. Why wasn't it coming out? I desperately want to be done with this. My placenta ended up having to be manually removed, which if that hasn't happened to any of you before, if you don't know, I had a doctor's forearm deep in my body to scoop out my placenta right after giving birth, which was lovely. Luckily it was successful, so I didn't have to go to the OR. I had tested positive for COVID while I was in labor. I was asymptomatic, so no one really thought I had COVID, but then halfway through my labor, they were like, "Oh, just kidding, you're sick, put on a mask." But the worst part was definitely that we had to stay 5 days after, so my son could be tested, but we were in complete quarantine. No one wanted to come in our room, and we couldn't leave. They left our food trays on the floor outside. It was a battle for me to get water. My needs continued to feel neglected. I breastfed my son. I hated it. He didn't latch for the first week of his life, which may sound like nothing, but when you're feeding a baby every 2 to 3 hours minimum, it just feels like your day is full of failure. I knew I wasn't going to be good enough for him. I couldn't comfort him, yet all he wanted was me. We finally got him to latch at his PD appointment, using a nipple shield. I still think how much that lactation nurse helped me that day, and how I hid my tears behind my mask because I didn't want anyone to know how hard of a time I was having. Every feed was the same thing: anxiety, stress, fear, rage, hatred, pain, frustration, and failure. It never felt easy. In fact, nothing about motherhood felt easy for me. I hated everything about it. I couldn't believe what I had done to myself, and even worse, to my baby. I was going to hate my life forever. Sleep was an entirely different battle for me. My son was colicky, which is another word for miserable that nobody seems to have the answer to. I knew something was wrong, but no one would listen to me. He screamed every night from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. Anytime he did sleep, I had to hold him. Every night was the same thing. It never got easier. I was losing my mind and everything with it. I cried, holding my screaming baby at 2 a.m. Why did I do this? How do I fix it? No one's coming to help me. I'm so tired. I can't do this for another second. My son's father did his best, but it was nowhere near what I needed. He was short-tempered and fighting his own demons with his addiction. He complained most times when I asked him to help with the overnights. I felt totally alone. I didn't want to bother him. I didn't want to hear him get frustrated because it just made it feel worse for me. So my baby and I continued to cry together every night. I was averaging 1 to 2 hours of sleep. What kind of life is this? How can I live this way? I can't. It took me 6 months and an absolute dream of a pediatrician to finally be able to advocate for my baby. He had a head tilt. I brought it up at every visit, and every pediatrician said, we'll just keep an eye on it. My son was diagnosed with torticollis and immediately started PT. He had a lot of tension and tightness in his neck, which made eating and sleeping really hard for him. During the evaluation, we also went over mouth ties. I was sure he had one, but I was shut down anytime I brought it up. The hospital checked and said he didn't have one, so there's no need to check again. 2 seconds after that dentist opened my son's mouth, I was validated. People were finally listening to me. I got an answer from someone. My suffering might have an end date, and so will my son's. Month 7, my son's father relapsed and drank for a single day. I felt like I finally had a moment to breathe, and my whole world fell apart. He was able to keep it together after that, but I couldn't relax. He was angry, and he was really struggling, and was snappy anytime I asked for help. I was counting down the seconds to our tire release appointment. I was praying that that would be the relief we all needed. Month 9, my son got all of his mouth ties released. I could hear him screaming from the waiting room. I was so angry and heartbroken for him. Why didn't this get done months ago? I was so sure. How come everyone else was so blind? This should have been fixed earlier when he was younger, and now he's older and suffering. I'm still suffering. Nobody cares. He nursed the best he had in his entire life after the procedure. That night, he had his first night of normal baby sleep in 9 months. I cried and cried. Months of suffering that were totally preventable. Month 11, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I was getting a good amount of sleep, which changed everything for me. I was by no means healed, but I felt like instead of drowning, I was treading water. Relief. I was afraid to feel it. And then a big relapse, something that I had plenty of experience with in our years of dating, but this was my first one with a baby. I got a chance to really look at how terrible my life had been over the last few years, but this time I wasn't okay, and I couldn't handle it like I could before. One night, I was walking in the pouring rain. I put my baby in his stroller. It was freezing. My dog had to go out to pee. My son's father was blackout drunk in his truck in the parking lot. He looked up at us, and he was lifeless, not a care in the world that we were out in the rain. I was fully alone. Nobody cared about me. I had to kick him out. It wasn't safe for Ben. He sobered up at his parents. After a few weeks, he went to rehab. I became a single parent overnight. I was in charge of our household finances, our son, our dog. Everything was my responsibility. I was drowning again. He got to run away with his problems. I didn't. I was stuck without the support to deal with mine. His problems had always trumped mine, but this time, I desperately needed him, and he abandoned me. The entire first year, I was ashamed of how badly I felt. I cried everywhere at first, in the shower, in the car, during every feed, in the bed, everywhere except for in front of others. That transformed into a thick rage that I couldn't control. Now I screamed before crying, sometimes out loud, sometimes into a pillow where my son couldn't see me. I wanted to pull my hair out, drive off a cliff, jump out a window, but not really. I sat on my kitchen floor a lot where no one could see me. I would sit in silence, totally numb. The air around me felt thick and heavy, weighing me down, forcing me to sit there. Car rides were where my mind would really wander, wondering what it would be like to run away from all of this, to die. If someone crashed into my car, would I feel it? I can't leave Ben. I'm all he has. So I always stayed. The next year was the hardest that I've ever had to work to survive. But somehow it was easier to actually do it all alone than to live with somebody who made me feel alone. Around month 15, I started my postpartum doula training. We got to the mental health portion and I was nervous. I knew at this point that everything that I had gone through was not normal. I never ended up getting help. I could never really find the strength to do so. I was feeling better. Up until this point, I really never knew how to put everything I felt into words. And then this mom spoke. She said, I didn't want to die, but I thought, man, if I could just get some rest. I shut my camera off and I bawled my eyes out. You mean other people feel all the scary and terrible things that I've felt? People can not want to live, but also not want to die. Year 2. I became a single mom, for real. When I officially left my son's father, I was finding purpose through my postpartum doula work, and I knew I was ready to take back my life. I needed to care about myself, but I finally had the energy and the desire to do so. I dove into things and people that made me happy and made me feel safe. I felt like myself for the first time in years. Year 3, I got health insurance, which I didn't have for a very long time, so it was a big deal. I became a full-time doula. I'm with someone who makes me feel safe and loved. I started therapy, and I finally got myself on medication. I've been working really hard to rewire my nervous system and the way my brain works to be a better mom. I have the absolute sweetest little boy who gives me more love and patience than sometimes I think that I deserve. We've gone through a lot together, and I take every moment I can to be grateful that we both made it out alive. I still have mom rage. I still have anxiety, and sometimes I go through phases of depression. I have extremely traumatic flashbacks that make me feel like I'm right back in it. But now I'm doing the things that I need to do to take care of myself. All because of a little validation and support from the people around me. Motherhood is really hard. It humbles you and it rips you open to the most vulnerable version of yourself that you'll ever meet. But I love this current version of myself more than any past version that's existed. I love my boy more than anything else in the world, and I finally love being a mom. Oh,
thank you.
I was really holding off and trying to grab one of these the whole time.